baboon police officers, a mad scientist and his two-headed dog, and stone pillows. You likely never studied any of those things in your textbooks, but they're just some of the weirdest facts that exist in human history. First up are the Victorian era arsenic baths. This may sound ridiculous to you, and that's because it is. It's hard to believe that anyone would want to do such a thing, but this practice was actually quite popular in the Victorian era. The reason why people would take baths in arsenic was because the substance would reduce the pigment of a person's skin, giving them a much whiter tone. It seems like bleach white skin was extremely popular at this time, and people were coming up with all sorts of ways to achieve this. Aside from bathing in arsenic, some stores were also selling arsenic crackers that people could eat. Although it might have helped them with maintaining their pale skin tone, it shouldn't be too hard to see why this was a bad idea. Arsenic is incredibly dangerous and can cause severe damage to a person's vital organs. These bizarre skincare practices led to a ton of serious health issues in the Victorian era, so it's pretty obvious to see why this practice was left behind in the dust. Now we have one of the longest wars in history that had no casualties. The Netherlands and the Isles of Sicily declared war back in 1651, and it did not officially end until 1986. The whole thing stemmed from the English Civil War that was fought between the Royalists and the Parliamentarians. Now, because the Dutch were aligned with the Parliamentarians and wanted to maintain their relationship with England, they vowed to fight against any Royalists during the Civil War. This included the Isles of Sicily, however things never actually boiled over into any armed conflict with the small islands. The English Civil War officially ended in 1651 following the surrender of the Royalists, but it seems like everyone just forgot about the Isles of Sicily. Despite peace treaties being signed everywhere else, Sicily was still technically at war with the Dutch, who never acknowledged them. 335 years later, however, the Isles of Sicily wrote to the Dutch embassy in England and found that no peace treaty had ever been signed. They finally ended their feud that included absolutely no violence on the 17th of April, 1986. Up next are the baboon police officers in Egypt. Animals had some pretty important jobs back in ancient times, and this even included formal police work. Now, way back in ancient Egypt, the authorities were actually using trained baboons to help deal with some of their most cunning criminals. While they technically were not considered as registered police officers, they were basically the ancient equivalent of a modern-day K-9 unit. Baboons were loyal servants to the police who would use them to track down criminals and search for clues that the human officers had trouble finding. The baboons were also known to be quite vicious when it came to hunting for the criminals. Ancient drawings and inscriptions detail how police would release the baboon to latch onto the criminal's leg and bite them until they admitted guilt. Now, even back in ancient Egypt, some people may have considered the practice barbaric, but the police were completely satisfied with their animal companions. It was also another scary way to make sure that every citizen kept themselves in line and followed the rules. After that, we have drinking gladiator blood to treat epilepsy. There were a lot of weird medical practices going on in ancient Rome, but this might be the strangest of them all. Epilepsy is a very scary condition, and it seemed like no one was able to treat it thousands of years ago. Many doctors tried all sorts of different methods, but it sounds like people believe that gladiator blood was the magic cure. Now, from having a look at the Colosseum of Rome, it should be easy to tell that gladiator fights were very popular back in the day. These brave fighters were also highly regarded by many of the citizens, and some people were convinced that their blood was much stronger than their own. This idea got so out of hand that some people actually seem to believe that their blood contained healing powers that could actually treat epilepsy. Even though gladiator fighting was outlawed around 400 AD, people still continued this nasty practice for many more years after. They also believed it helped to cleanse the soul, despite gladiator fights being absolutely barbaric. Next on our list is the perfect 2400-year-old shipwreck. It sounds impossible, but this is actually very true. Way at the bottom of the Black Sea is an ancient shipwreck that has somehow maintained its image over multiple millenniums. The ship and its crew originally met their demise sometime around 400 BC, so this is widely regarded as one of the oldest shipwrecks on the planet. Now, right away, this doesn't even sound physically possible. Usually when a shipwreck hits the sea floor, the elements will slowly consume it and will eventually disappear off the face of the earth. This one, however, has somehow remained intact for over 2,000 years. The ship was originally a Greek trading vessel that was mostly constructed of wood, but something obviously went terribly wrong during its journey across the sea. Most researchers have stated that this ship should have disappeared thousands of years ago, but it sounds like there is a logical explanation for its preservation. It turns out that the severe lack of oxygen at this exact location has actually preserved the wood and helped the ship remain intact. There's a very good chance it will survive another 2,000 years and continue to be the world's oldest shipwreck. Up next, we have dead teeth dentures. Yep, if people needed a new set of teeth hundreds of years ago, they could just take a set out of someone who wasn't using them anymore. before. Now, nobody actually enjoys going to the dentist. You should know how much worse things used to be without the help of modern medicine. Dentistry was still in its infancy in the 18th and 19th century, so there was no real cure for rotting teeth. Britain's sugar craze meant that demand for dentures was extremely high, and dentists had to find clever ways to create new false teeth. One of the crazy methods they came up with was to bypass the whole false thing and pull old teeth from deceased soldiers. Following the deadly Battle of Waterloo, where 50,000 soldiers sadly lost their lives, dentists were pulling the best teeth they could find out of the human remains so they could repurpose them as dentures. That sounds pretty gross in any time period, but people used to line up to receive their new set of old teeth. So while a trip to the dentist is never a fun time for anybody, you should just be thankful that no one is giving you a set of somebody else's dead teeth. Next up, we have the animal trials. It's a real mystery how any animal could defend itself on trial, but people in ancient and medieval times didn't seem to care. To many people, these creatures were as equally responsible as humans if they managed to commit any crimes. In fact, there was a time when it wasn't uncommon for the animals to go on trial if their crimes were serious. These were usually just petty crimes like theft, but some animals were actually charged with taking lives. Animals would actually have to face a judge and listen to defendants and victim impact statements while having absolutely no way to defend themselves. It was a pretty ridiculous practice to say the least, but some places actually kept animal trials in place all the way up to the 18th century. The animals would almost always be found guilty since they couldn't defend themselves with any language that humans even spoke. It also meant that they would face many of the same punishments as humans depending on the severity of the crime. Petty crimes would either land them in jail or see them banished from town, while more serious crimes would often result in capital punishment for the poor animals. Next up is the world's first two-headed dog created by man. There aren't many things on Earth that are more unsettling than a dog that has a completely different breed growing out of its back. Now, there's a good chance you never learn how to accomplish this in school, but one mad scientist was keen on making this a reality. A Soviet scientist by the name of Vladimir Demikov decided that he was going to create a super dog that combined two functioning heads from two different breeds. He started the process by amputating the lower body of one dog and making an incision on the side of another that would act as the host. He managed to keep the heart of the amputated dog beating before sewing its upper body onto the back of the host. After many hours of radical reconstructive surgery, Demikov's creepy two-headed dog was finally complete. Both heads were able to use all of their senses, but the end result was just downright terrifying. It honestly just looks like one dog is growing out of the other's backside and trying to escape. The fact that Demikov also used two different breeds made the whole process even creepier. There's been plenty of amazing transplant surgeries completed over the years, but this one definitely isn't one of them. After that, we have the stone pillows of Egypt. Yep, soft and fluffy pillows weren't always a mainstay in every bedroom. While many people did have soft pillows thousands of years ago, the ancient Egyptians actually used hard surfaces by choice. Archaeologists have actually uncovered tombs which included pillows made out of marble, ivory, and wood in addition to the traditional stone. It turns out that the Egyptians did this in order to keep the head elevated during sleep. While the pillow was simply a large slab of stone, it was actually concaved in the middle to allow a person to rest their head. The elevated position allowed air currents to travel under a person's head and cool them while they were sleeping. These stone pillows also served as spiritual objects as well, as many people believe they protected the head when it was at its most vulnerable position. Many of these stone pillows often had special engravings of protective images that were supposed to ward off any evil spirits that could arrive at night. Might not have been the softest thing in the world to sleep on, but the stone pillow definitely served its purpose. And last but not least is Abraham Lincoln, the accomplished wrestler. Abraham Lincoln was a fascinating US president whose life is filled with all sorts of amazing feats and accomplishments. But one of the lesser known facts about Abe Lincoln is that he was actually inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. As it turns out, Lincoln was far more interested in wrestling than politics during his younger years. It is believed that Lincoln competed in nearly 500 wrestling matches during his early years, and his possible win-loss record is absolutely astounding. Although there is no record of it and no way to actually back this up, many people have claimed that Lincoln only lost once and won every other match he ever competed in. For all of his accomplishments in the wrestling world in the 19th century, Lincoln was honored by the National Wrestling Hall of Fame in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This only helped to solidify the famous American president as one of the most interesting people to ever exist. However, we're still left wondering who that one person is that actually managed to beat up old Abe Lincoln. And that does it for a look at the 10 bizarre historical facts you weren't taught in school. Humanity has definitely been through some pretty strange times, and things are probably only going to get weirder in the future. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you all next time.